Since it is Mayflower month, and I'm a guy who's read a book or two about the Mayflower, why don't we examine one of the more colorful personalities among that ship's voyage, that being Captain Myles Standish. In his case, the color is red, like his beard and his temper. He was born in England. He got a military education as a young man, and he fought in the Netherlands. The religious separatists, who would later be known as the Pilgrims, also spent some time in the Netherlands. That was over about a decade during the 1610s. And that's probably where Standish met William Bradford and William Brewster. They were the driving force behind that congregation. If you've ever read anything about Myles Standish, you probably know him as the short guy who could fight like a beast. Usually in paintings of the Pilgrims or on the Mayflower, he's the guy who's always wearing the Mogollon style helmet. Other than the finer details of his involvement at Plymouth, not a lot is known about his life. They say that he was born circa 1584, so he's from that era where not everybody had very precise records kept about their lives. Earlier this week, I read a book about him called The Adventurous Life of Myles Standish by Cheryl. While the focal figure is Standish, the title is still a bit of a misnomer as it really encompasses the Plymouth expedition on the whole, and Standish's life is more or less what brackets the tale. I'd say that overall, like 15 to 20% of the narrative is about him, and the rest is about the voyage across the Atlantic in 1620, along with the ensuing years at Plymouth. But that said, Harness's book is one of the best when it comes to contextualizing the events around the Pilgrims and their journey. She gives a concise explanation of the Gregorian calendar. It was created in 1582 under Pope Gregory XIII. And she also explains why the United Kingdom moved off of the old Julian calendar in 1750. I think there was some act of parliament that went into effect in 1752, blah, blah, blah. The dates listed in the Plymouth records are off by 10 days according to our reckoning. So if they sailed into Cape Cod on November 11th by their calendar, it was actually November 21st by ours. Harness also explained how King James's predecessor, who was Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, she allowed religious liberty in England until she died in 1603. So all the Pilgrims, the elders especially, grew up in an era where they had that liberty. And then when James took the throne after her death, he told his kingdom they were all going to be Anglicans and nothing else was going to be allowed. So it was that loss of a pre-existing freedom that drove those Puritan separatists to Leiden, Holland in 1609. However, they were nervous about pending wars between the Spanish and the Dutch, and if you've seen my videos about the Captain Alatriste novels, you know a little bit about those. Those are told from the Spanish point of view, and they happen around the same time. The Pilgrims were also worried about their kids growing up to be more culturally Dutch than English, so they started looking for a new solution. Harness gave one of her best explanations of all when she discussed the Mayflower Compact and why the passengers drafted it. They were punished for trying to practice their religion outside of the king's permission, and they even had bounties on them for trying to leave England on their way to Holland. But if they were to secure a patent to build a colony in the New World with financial backing, they couldn't be punished for their religious practices there. The problem was that their patent was for farther south than they ended up, due to the time that they left and the storms and such. And if they went ashore without the proper legal attachments to the English throne, all of their contracts would be in disarray, and they had a lot of passengers who were on service contracts. A quick note about that, in my original Mayflower Passengers video, oftentimes people would mistake those service contracts with slavery or like involuntary indentured servitude. Those service contracts were how the lower classes would exchange their labor for eventually like a payout or property after a certain number of years. It was kind of their form of college. It's like, hey, work for this amount of time and you'll get this division of whatever that comes at the other end of it. It was only comparable to slavery in the sense that the agreement required work. It was not comparable to slavery because it was an agreement between two parties. It was not involuntary. It was hard to do, but so was everything in the 1600s. Those service contracts were very different from the institution of slavery. Writing the compact was one way of saying, we're forming a mini government. We're calling it a body politic where we are still subject to King James, so all of those laws still apply. We're just taking it upon ourselves to make this legal so that everything's on the level. That is a vast oversimplification, but she made it make sense in the book, so read it the way that she put it. All of this is very valuable information from a book that purports to be all about Myles Standish. She does get into his military actions with the Indians, for better or worse, and his contributions to the colony's security during the early years. She dips in and out of his life, but those first couple of years at Plymouth are the main focus of the body of the text. I think she also does a great service to the poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow called The Courtship of Myles Standish, wherein Myles sends his scribe, John Alden, to woo the young Priscilla Mullins on Myles's behalf. Myles has a very forceful personality and is bad with words, while John is good at that sort of thing and he wants Priscilla to like him. The problem is John likes Priscilla too, and they're closer in age, while Myles is a widower, although these things weren't hard social obstacles to marriage at the time. The Longfellow story depicts several true events from Plymouth's history, condensing them into a very short timeline. But so far there hasn't been any evidence for the supposed love triangle between Myles, Priscilla, and John. That's probably just an issue of artistic license. John Alden did go on to marry Priscilla in real life, and Myles married a woman named Barbara who came on another ship. The Standish and Alden families would remain close for decades throughout the colony's growth. If that Longfellow poem sounds familiar, it's the inspiration for the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special in 1973. There's even a reference from Linus, who plays the role of historian.
Do you remember the story of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins and Captain Myles Standish?
To which Peppermint Patty replies,
"This isn't like that one at all."
However, it was in fact remarkably like that, with Charlie Brown playing the role of Priscilla and Peppermint Patty and Marcy playing the roles of Myles Standish and John Alden, respectively. Anyway, The Adventurous Life of Myles Standish is a very short read, and the audio version is quite inexpensive on Audible. To boot, there is at least one version of The Courtship of Myles Standish available in the Audible Plus library, so you can read both of those books in a matter of hours. I highly recommend them as a supplement to your Mayflower and Thanksgiving studies. They provide great seasonal color, and they will help to round out your understanding of the Plymouth colony early on. And you'll even gain a greater appreciation for the contributions of Myles Standish, who was a really cool figure to study. Hey, thank you for watching that. Did you know that I'm also an author? You can check the description for a link to my book, Mr. Friday. It's set in a future where Black Friday is militarized and televised, and the best Friday fighters end up getting sponsors and backing, but it just so happens that the very best of them actually wants to take the holiday down. When he's approached by a couple of other like-minded fighters, he jumps at the chance, and it goes haywire from there. This is a short novella, and it's available in ebook format for just 99 cents. Drive safe. See you out there.